Question here from Adam Bushley, who says, the YouTube review of the Lumineer Axie HD2 said if you ever use goggles with the DJI FPV drone, the Axie HD2 may not work well or maybe even cause damage, since they're only 5.8 gigahertz and the DJI drone is dual band. Is that true? No, there is no truth to the idea that the goggles would be damaged. Like the DJI, putting a single band antenna on a dual band radio will result in worse reception in the band that it's not tuned for, but it's not going to damage anything. It's not out of the question that a radio receiver could be damaged by having the wrong antenna on it. That is not a completely implausible idea, but it's not going to happen with the DJI goggles and this specific combination of antennas. I don't buy that. I don't think that's true. The video is always 5.8 gigahertz. I think that in some situations, the control can be, well, that's the DJI FPV drone. Ooh, I'm not sure about that. Does the DJI FPV drone do video over 2.4? I don't know about that. You could get reduced range, I guess, is the thing. I think you could lock the DJI FPV drone to 2.4 and it would do, I'm not sure. So it's possible that you'll get worse range if you use a single band antenna with a dual band device. Yep, that's possible. But I think the DJI FPV drone is usually in 5.8 gigahertz, but I would need to do some research on that. Nothing's going to be damaged though. Bob Grayton. I bought an ELRS Whoopfly 16 for HD0 as my first quad. I want to change the SPI flight controller to something, or the SPI-based, I think you mean the SPI-based receiver, to something better. Any recommendation? Can a SpeedyBee work? Oh, no, you do mean the flight controller. So here's the thing. Those little 1.6-inch things, I would encourage you to stick with the flight controller that's on there. Because, like, when you get down in that size, there's a lot of tight integration. Mounting hardware, the exact way everything goes together is pretty fiddly. The SpeedyBee won't work because the Whoopfly 16, surely it uses 25 millimeter Whoop style mounting. And so the SpeedyBee is a 30 millimeter flight controller. So that's just not going to work. If you did change it, you would need an all-in-one flight controller with ESC and flight controller built in. It would need to have 25 millimeter mounting, and the ESC would need to, well, that's probably like, what is it, a 5 or a 12 amp ESC at most. So you'd need to have an amp rating on the ESC that was sufficient for what those motors were going to pull. But I gotta say, if your only motivation for getting rid of that flight controller is that there's an SPI-based receiver on it, I really think that probably everything's going to be okay, and you're just borrowing trouble, as the saying goes, by wanting to swap it out. If you really hate that SPI-based receiver, just put an EP2 style receiver with a ceramic antenna on it, and then keep the flight controller, because the flight controller is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, as far as I know. That's my advice, Bob. Lucid Vax wants to know, is there a way to use the Rush FPV microphones with the Tramp? I have one quad with a Rush Tank Mini Ultimate. I can use it easily, but my other quad has TX800 and runs Tramp. So the issue there is not whether the video transmitter uses Tramp protocol or smart audio. The issue is whether the VTX has a microphone input. If the VTX doesn't have a microphone input, you cannot use it with that microphone. And I'm going to guess that the TX800 VTX, we're going to look, but I'm going to guess it doesn't have a microphone input. But let's not just guess. Let's check. This is the SpeedyBee TX800. It does not have a microphone input. And you're probably getting these things mixed up because way back in the day, smart audio and audio was the same pad, and you could use it for a microphone or you could use it for remote control. That has never been true for Tramp VTXs, and modern VTXs don't do it that way either. If they have a microphone input, they will give you a separate wire for it. Does the TX800 have a built-in microphone? Sometimes they do. I guess you would probably have said if they did. It doesn't look like it has an input for an external mic, so I think you're out of luck here. Isherwood W wants to know, what's the minimum cell voltage during a flight to prevent battery damage? For a LiPo, it's 3.0 volts. If any cell goes under 3.0 volts, it will start to be damaged. And if it goes too low or stays below, like if you dip it down to 2.8 and immediately stop flying, it'll probably bounce back up to 3.0 and hold there. But my rule of thumb is that if the battery is resting below 3.0 and not coming back up, or if it's kind of tanking towards 0, that's permanent damage and the battery should be discarded. My recommendation for a typical sort of flying situation is that around 3.4 or 3.5 volts is where you start to think, I need to come home. That's under load while you're flying. And if it's sagging down to like 3.2, 3.3, you're really about to start damaging the battery because you're gonna hit that wall pretty soon. Mateus FPV wants to know, I'm buying a new O3 Air unit. The antenna is dual polarized or linear? Both. It is a dual element linear polarized antenna, and the two linear elements are at 45 degrees orientation to each other. That's according to TrueRC. Hugo from TrueRC, he gave me that information, and he probably knows what he's talking about because he makes antennas. And the first super chat comes from Jordy Wetzel. Thank you for a $10 super chat, Jordy. Just finished a new Cinelifter build, and I'm having an issue with battery voltage readings in the DJI V2 goggles and Caddx Vista. Voltage freezes randomly during flight and unfreezes randomly. I've heard of this issue before, where the OSD freezes up. I don't know what causes it or how to fix it. Like, you would normally guess it's something like a CPU being overloaded, but in my experience, that's not what it is. So, like, theoretically, you could take your flight controller and take it down from 8K to 4K, right? But you really shouldn't have to do that. So what I would suggest you do personally is, if you are not using WTFOS, try rooting your goggles and installing WTFOS and see if that OSD works better. That would be my advice. The freeze is because the MSP connection is dropping out, but I'm not sure what would cause that. And I would hope that just going to a different platform would fix it.
Just to be clear, if it's not the whole OSD and it's just battery voltage, then it could be a software issue in Betaflight with battery, not the OSD freezing. So you might want to double check in Betaflight, like take the props off, spin the motors, make sure the battery drops, that sort of thing. And you're not freezing inside of the Betaflight software, because then you can narrow it down to, is this the MSP or is this like actually showing me the wrong voltage sometimes, something like that. Like, I just helped somebody with that, and for some reason their scaling was corrupted. They thought it was freezing, but it was just sitting on a number for a long time because it wasn't scaling up and down.
Oh, interesting.
And the only way we could fix it was flashing. Something was bugged in the config. So.
Yeah. I mean, he says battery voltage, and so I'm guessing it's a
not
really...
the whole OSD, just battery voltage.
But you're assuming he has the whole OSD. If he's never rooted his goggles, he may only have battery voltage.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that's the thing that is up in the air. If he's rooted and he has the full OSD and only battery voltage is freezing, no, I agree. That's a battery voltage problem, not an OSD problem.